send you a small video on how they did almost 3 hours. They went and did you're enjoying on the virtual world. So all the
No, so
talent there on that.
this entire month I have done a virtual branch meeting.
Wow,
So with all my 60 branches,
very good.
and I expect to complete this by tomorrow afternoon, where I have spoken to my entire branch team. I think there is someone who has a lot of disturbance.
Yeah, guys, put on the mute whenever, yeah, so that only Amit and Gaurav will
Right.
chat, and I will bring it in between with my expert comments. Some Gaurav requires a lot of the way to describe Gaurav is only I can do it.
You are free to use
All
whichever
the edge.
adjectives you want. I'm sure
Yeah,
that given that we have 50 budding,
yeah.
graduates or professionals, you will choose the words carefully.
Yeah. No, I think that's not a problem.
Before
Uh,
that, Amit, I should speak in English, Hindi, what?
whatever you are comfort, whatever you want to speak, you can
No, no,
always
whatever.
do.
I can't
No,
speak Gujarati, but English, Hindi, I'm very conversant and you know.
so you tell some of the stories in Hindi and most of
Okay,
it in English. English
okay,
is the normal. These people are very comfortable with the English, so that
perfect,
should not be a problem. So
perfect.
Amit, would you like to introduce, and then I will put in my 2 lines, and then Gaurav can take over.
Okay, sir. Welcome, sir. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Uh, I'm Amit Srivastav. Am I audible? Uh,
Yes,
yeah. So I am Amit Srivastav, and I am associated with the Adani Institute of Infrastructure Management as associate professor in accounting finance area. I'm also heading the Center of Excellence in Finance and Risk Management. And the theme of the session is Finance World, and our guest, Mr. Gaurav Gupta, will interact with you on financial market and mergers and acquisitions. So a little housekeeping before we get started. So if you have any question during the presentation, please type them into the question or message box. We will bring them up during the presentation, and we'll also have time for questions at the end. So now, without further excitement, we will turn the time over to Mr. Gupta. Mr. Gaurav Gupta is CEO and Director of Adani Capital and Adani Housing Finance. Mr. Gupta has over 20 years of investment banking, corporate finance, and advisory experience in India. Prior to setting up Adani Capital and Adani Housing Finance, Mr. Gupta was Managing Director and India Head of Macquarie Capital Securities Private Limited. In 6 years, he was instrumental in the setup and growing the firm into leading advisory franchise with the dominant market position in sectors such as infrastructure and real estate. Mr. Gupta has extensive experience advising Indian and international clients on domestic and cross-border M&A and capital market transactions. So prior to Macquarie Capital, Mr. Gupta was director at Nomura Financial Advisory and Securities Private Limited, Lehman Brothers Services India Private Limited, and Rothschild Private Limited. He completed his chartered accountancy in 1996 and started his professional career with Arthur and Anderson. So I welcome you, sir, on behalf of entire team of AIM, and over to you, sir.
Devang, sir, you want to say something?
Yeah, so friends, here is a person who has been all over the world. He has seen everything and done all the corporate finance and all the financial related activities. So there is no shortage of knowledge, transactions, and a very nice person. Whenever we want, he's more than willing to take out his time for us. It's very important that you understand how his career from a hardcore chartered accountant, which is a purely Arthur Anderson audit firm and an advisory firm, how we moved into a very different role of some of the largest names in the financial world. And then finally, it took up at a very young age the role of the CEO. So, Gaurav, all yours. Tell us about your journey. Tell us what it means for us to understand how to do a deal in the M&A and the larger piece of the crisis in the financial markets and all that. And whatever else you would like to share with us from your experience. Everything is valuable to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Devang Bhai. Thank you, Amit. Good
Thank you, sir.
afternoon, friends. I think Devang Bhai and Amit have said a lot. And this is the second time I am addressing a batch at AIM. And as Amit mentioned, you know, I did my chartered accountancy, but I must tell you, I'm a chartered accountant by default. And there was ever one regret that I have is that I could never do my MBA. So whenever I am in front of, you know, students like you, it always brings back those memories where how, because some friends were doing CA along with BCom, and I said, chalo, let us all do it all together. And then as chance would have it, when I cleared my BCom, you know, I had cleared my inter. And then after that, things just went on and on. And many times in my career, I thought I should stop and I should maybe take a break and do a management degree. But wo situation kabhi aayi nahi. Anyway, but it's wonderful to be, you know, talking to each of you. I think the management degree that we have today, and when I compare it to what you know, we had at that point of time, a lot of things have evolved. It is far more relevant, practical, and I'm sure when you come out of this course, you will be more knowledgeable, smarter in a true sense. Because I always believed that while a chartered accountancy degree gave you good, deep accounting and financial knowledge, and I know Amit mentioned he's an expert, I can say I'm still not an expert, but this degree will give you relevance, will teach you practicality, which I think would be extremely important as you choose the next phase of your career. The other thing I think which we have all become accustomed to is, you know, in this lockdown is digital meetings and digital trainings. And I'm sure a lot of you would have had a lot of, you know, Zoom sessions with friends. Some of you may have signed up for very many virtual classes. My children, they are now learning everything digitally. And I think the true revelation of this lockdown is that digital education, I think, is the biggest gainer, and it gives us the flexibility and the effectiveness, which sometimes we are not able to kind of get in a classroom setting. Having said that, yes, I'm sure a lot of you miss meeting each other, you know, parting with each other. But I'm sure hopefully things will kind of come back to normal soon, and then, you know, it will be things as usual. So I have a little presentation. It's not too many slides. I will take you through that presentation, but I think feel free to ask as many questions, clear as many doubts. So I think my presentation broadly touches upon two factors: the financial markets and what comprises financial markets. That is the first part of the presentation. And the second part is, you know, as Devang Bhai said, mergers and acquisitions. It's something which I have done for most part of my career. When companies acquire businesses, when they acquire firms, why do they do that? And in my presentation, I have tried to capture actual examples of all the acquisitions that the Adani Group did, and I was fortunate to be a part of a lot of these acquisitions. And we will take these examples and I will talk about why some of these acquisitions were done. So I think, if we can move to the next slide, maybe we can start with the financial markets. So really, if people talk of the financial ecosystem or the financial markets in India, so the biggest component of financial markets is the banking segment. So banks again are commercial banks. We all have our banking relationship with them: SBI, HDFC, ICICI, Axis. We also have, as part of that, we have some cooperative banks. We have the regional rural banks. But then a few years back, there was a new category of banks where licenses were issued. One of it was small finance banks, and there were about 10 of these licenses which were issued. The difference between a small finance bank and a commercial bank is a small finance bank has to do small loans. They are not allowed to do big loans, and a certain percentage of their loans should qualify as what our Reserve Bank calls as priority sector lending. This is typically loans that you give to the MSME segment, a farmer. So they are effectively these in all these 10 entities who are given these licenses. They were given these licenses because 9 of these 10s were microfinance, and the government, in the thinking that to help financial inclusion in the country, all stemming from Prime Minister Modi's Jan Dhan scheme, where he's trying to get everybody used to banking habits, all the subsidy being deposited in the bank so that there is no leakage. So that is what these licenses were given. And some of these have now become quite actually large banks, AU being one. We have Equitas, we have Ujjivan, we have ESAF, and a few of them. There was a third category of licenses which were issued, which were payment banks. Now, again, I think there were about 10 of these licenses which were issued, and I think 5 or 6 of them have actually gone live. A payment bank can only accept deposit. They are not able to lend. So they accept deposit, and then they can only invest in government securities or in other banks, etc. Again, the reason why these licenses were given, so that deposit opening banking habits could be inculcated in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities in the country. And as we have seen, a lot of the telecom companies who had these huge networks, they all applied for these payment bank licenses. The second segment that we know about, which Adani Capital and Adani Housing is, we are actually a non-bank finance company. Now, the difference between a non-bank finance company and banks, the real difference is one where we can't accept real-time deposits. So you can't open a current account and a savings account with an NBFC. Of course, there are some benefits of an NBFC. We don't have as many regulatory compulsions as a bank has. And this entire segment effectively has evolved in the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years. And today you have many of these NBFCs and housing finance companies who are many times larger than a lot of these banks. There is a third category of institutions called microfinance institutions. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but these microfinance institutions are institutions. They lend money in rural areas to a group of women. So women borrow this in a group, each becomes a co-guarantor for each other, and the RBI regulates how much is the maximum that you can give to one single borrower. So that limit today is roughly about 1 lakh of rupees. So the first three categories in financial markets are what we call balance sheet activities, all concerned with lending. And then you have the other two non-balance sheet activities from a lending perspective: insurance companies and asset management companies. Insurance companies, I think we all know, we all take insurance, and again, insurance can be categorized into three parts. Life insurance, which we take to protect lives; general insurance, which we may take for our property, motor, fire, theft. And then there's a new category also which has emerged: health insurance. A lot of companies are health and non-life together, but typically you will find that going forward it is possible that each is developed into a separate category. Similarly, we have asset management companies. These asset management companies is, I'm sure, some of you who park your savings in mutual funds. So asset management companies, and there are all kinds of schemes. There are schemes with no risk, there are schemes with high risks, there are equity schemes, there are balance schemes. And then, of course, there is a fifth category: the development financial institutions, who effectively play a role in either promoting financing to infrastructure, agriculture, export, import. And they may not always be direct lenders, but they could be refinancers for institutions who are taking an active role. So each of these, by virtue of their name, development financial institutions, they all are specific to areas which help meet the development needs of our country. So I think this is broadly, I think, what financial markets. Of course, there is one part, the other part of financial markets, which is linked to your capital markets. So all your brokers and your insurance agent. So that's a separate part. But really, this is the main part from a asset management and loan perspective. We can move to the next slide, please. So just so that, to give everybody a perspective in terms of the size of the market, we can move to the next slide. So the size of the credit market in India is roughly about 146 lakh crores. And large part is driven by banks. So roughly 80% would be banks. NBFCs and housing finance companies would be roughly about 18%, and about microfinance is a very small segment. That entire market would be roughly about 2 lakh crores. And just so that in terms of size, by far, State Bank of India is the largest bank. Its market share is almost 35% of the total credit market. It is by far the largest in terms of size also, and in terms of branches. Then HDFC Bank has emerged as the second largest. It is the largest private sector bank at 15 lakh crore. And then you have Bank of Baroda, ICICI Bank, and Axis Bank. Similarly, as I was mentioning, a lot of housing finance companies and NBFCs have also become very large, and in some cases they are larger than banks. HDFC by far is the largest housing finance company. 4.5 lakh crore is the market share of this. In fact, if you break it up into housing market share, their share in housing finance would also be as much as 35-40%. And this followed by LIC, and then everybody else is relatively smaller. Coming to NBFCs, without Bajaj Finance is the largest NBFC with a market share of 1.4 lakh crore, followed by Shriram, L&T, Mahindra, and Chola. One of the things I think a lot of people talk about the NBFC sector, at least in the last two and a half years, we have seen some very prominent NBFCs who have defaulted. And the two names that everybody is very familiar with is ILNFS and DHFL. In one case, the government has appointed a team to liquidate that NBFC, and in the other case, there is a insolvency proceedings in the case of DHFL, which is currently being run to kind of sell that business. So while that may be the case, but if you really look at the evolution of the Indian lending market, earlier it used to be banks were deposit takers, and every time you had to get a loan, you had to go to the branch. And when you talk to your parents, they will tell you, I think people loved, and in a lot of case, not our generation, people still have a habit of spending 2 hours in with their branches, with their branch managers. So that used to be. NBFCs played a very important role where they changed the lending practices, where instead of customers going to a branch, it was the first time the NBFCs went to the customer. And they were also instrumental in a lot of new products which were introduced in the market. So, for example, gold loans were introduced by NBFCs. Consumer durable finance, when you walk today to a Vijay Sales or any of these, shops to buy a computer, mobile phone, I think, the salesman is very keen to sell you a Bajaj Finance product. So Bajaj Finance pioneered consumer finance. The entire microfinance was pioneered by NBFCs. Used commercial vehicle finance was pioneered by organizations such as Shriram Transport and Chola. So a lot of these segments were invented by NBFCs. They put in place how to assess a customer who does not have a bank statement, who does not have banking habits, who does not file an income tax return, who doesn't file GST returns. And even today, they have been at the forefront of this fintech or digital evolution. So the NBFCs were the first to come up with a product where, on the app, you can get an instant, personal loan, unsecured loan. And they built at the back end systems and processes whereby how you could kind of evaluate credit. They built their rule engines based on, what is your age, what is your bureau score, what is your education. So they have really been the forefront for all these inventions that we see today. For us, people like us, who born, we think that this is a normal, but 10, 15 years back, we did not have these avenues, we did not have these products. So if we
So
can move to the,
Gaurav,
yeah.
so Gaurav, I just wanted to ask you that these most of these banks have beautiful, large, tall buildings, stone buildings, and they look almost, totally like a fortress. So, what is the risk that these banks really live with? Can you share that with your experience, especially something like an ILFS or a Yes Bank? They look very strong. Nothing can go wrong with them. But what can really go wrong? I mean, can you give some insight?
So whether it is a bank or it is a non-bank, the business is very simple. A bank takes deposits from the public and lends money to its customers. So at one level, you take a deposit and you lend money. A non-bank is not allowed to take deposit from the public, but you take loans from the bank, or you go to the public and you issue debentures and you raise money. So the biggest risk that for any financial institution is how do you manage your liability and asset. Now let us take an example of what happened in the case of ILFS. It all started with the fact that ILFS was borrowing for a short-term period and lending to its customers for a long-term period, as they call an asset liability mismatch. So every time while the circle was moving and they were able to continuously borrow short term, they were able to kind of meet their obligations, because while the liabilities were running, let's say in 18 months, the asset book was running in 5 years. All this could continue so long as they could continue borrowing forever and ever. But the minute they were not able to borrow more and there was stress on the asset side, they were not able to meet their liability obligations. We saw a similar thing in Yes Bank, where Yes Bank gave a lot of loans. And as these loans started becoming bad and they started reporting, a lot of people started pulling out deposits from the bank, where there came a situation where they did not have money to meet the requirements of the depositors. And that is where SBI stepped in and put money to save the bank. So in any financial institution, the key is how do you manage your liabilities and asset? And the minute there is a mismatch, there is a risk that the entire system could collapse. Fortunately, in our country, the general view is that the Reserve Bank should not and will not allow a bank to fail. But theoretically, any deposit that you have in a bank, you only have insurance cover up to 5 lakh of rupees. So Devang bhai, does that answer your question?
Yeah, very much. I always feel that my money is safe in the bank, but you rightly said that up to 5 lakhs only. And then, of course, there are
Correct.
political issues. But this is a very important, friends. We'll later on talk about it. That understanding the liability and the asset side of the balance sheet, with Amit will teach you, is so important, and especially in the context of the banking business. Very true.
Yeah, we can go to the next slide. Yeah, can we go to the next slide? Sorry. I think I've spoken about this. Again, talks about other aspects of a public sector bank and a private sector bank in terms of how many branches they have, market cap. I think we can skip this. So let me, in the context of what I've explained to you, let me try and talk about what I do, on a day-to-day basis. So getting a banking license is not easy. You need a track record. And in the last, when I'm talking of a banking license, a normal banking license, there have only been 4 licenses that have been issued, full-fledged licenses. And even to get a small finance bank licenses, you need to kind of have a track record and meet some of the conditions which the Reserve Bank has prescribed. So NBFCs is something which also needs an RBI approval. It's a regulated business, but it is easier to get this license. So we are an NBFC. We have 2 entities in which we do business. Adani Capital, which is the NBFC, and Adani Housing Finance, which is the housing finance company. At Adani Capital, when we were setting up this business, we always felt that, of course, we have to find a segment where there is an opportunity, but we equally felt that every business has to have a purpose. If you look at Adani Group, our vision and we always say growth with goodness. And our chairman always believes, and he says that the group got into businesses which were then the need of the nation. So when, the power sector was opening up, we got into power. Before that, we got into ports when trades were open, when import export was opening up, when there is a thrust from the government, that India should be at the forefront of renewables, we got into renewables. So I think with a similar objective, we were trying to find where is the opportunity and what is the purpose. And our mission, our objective in Adani Capital is that we want to support the micro and small entrepreneurs in the country. Now, a micro and small entrepreneurs typically would be anyone, where the loans that we give would be not more than 25 lakh to 50 lakh. In fact, the average ticket size of loans that we give is 5 lakh of rupees. He could be a farmer, he could be a trucker, he could be a shopkeeper. And these are the segments, as I was earlier talking about, who don't have formal banking habits, who are raising money. Everybody needs money for business. Who are raising money, but they are raising money from unorganized sources, and in many cases at 2% and 3% a month. So our stated vision is, how can I build a company where I can assess their needs, give them a product. Someone who needs money to buy stock, let's say a shopkeeper, he doesn't need a loan for 3 years. He needs a rotating loan every 30 days. If he's going to, obviously, if I can give him a 30-day loan, it will be cheaper than a 3-year loan. So our entire focus is, can we give these segment loans which meet their requirement and at rates significantly lower than the unorganized segment where they are borrowing today at 2 and 3% a month. So that is our mantra in Adani Capital. Similarly, Adani Housing Finance, they say India has a shortage of about 2 crore homes, and as people want to move from villages to urban areas, as we have more nuclear families, I think there is a big need for formal housing. If you ask me, in places like Bombay, more so now with COVID, 50% of this city actually lives in slums. I think this entire push to further move everybody into formal housing is only going to get increased. And we think that there is, again, a huge opportunity. Again, some of these customers, our customers could be, rickshaw drivers. You could have a tea stall. Again, they are not part of formal banking process. They can't go to a bank. A bank will ask for a bank statement. Our aim is to make sure each and every of this individual is able to kind of meet his housing needs. So it is with these two objectives that we set up this business. We are roughly about, Adani Capital is about 3 years old, and Adani Housing is about 2 years old. If you can move to the next slide. This is our footprint. We have roughly about 60 branches in capital. We have branches in 4 states. Rajasthan is our biggest footprint with 19 branches, followed by Karnataka, Gujarat, and western parts of Maharashtra. On the housing side, we are only in 3 states. We are not yet in Karnataka, where we operate out of roughly about 27 branches. Most of our branches are actually in the non-metro, and I would say the semi-urban centers. So if I were to take Gujarat as an example, we have a branch in Himmatnagar, Mehsana, Gandhidham, Jamnagar, Surat, Tharad. So that's the kind of location where for the product and the segment that we were focusing on, we see greater opportunity, because there is a larger part of the population there who don't get the finance or the customized finance that we say that they need for their business. So we can move to the next slide, please. I think, the products that we do, a term loan means I give a loan for a defined period, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, and you have a, EMI which you pay. As in India, we always talk about, 64 million MSMEs, but 98% of these are, really micro enterprises who hire anywhere between 1 or 2 people to 10 people. On the supply chain finance, this is where we give, 30-day credit, 60-day credit, 90-day credit. Farm, we believe, again, is a segment where there is the productivity in India is very low. as there is more information awareness with the farmer, with technology and all the fintech companies, and so much information being available with mechanization, we think it's a good market. Similarly, as we are looking at, building roads, improving logistics, we think there's a huge market for commercial vehicles. And housing finance is, what we do in the housing finance company. So in fact, everything that we do in Adani Capital is for an entrepreneur. Every loan that we give is for income generation. We come from an old fashioned thinking that we want our customers to earn first and then spend. Housing is the only, you can technically say, it's a consumption loan that we give, which helps our customer to effectively own a home. And in many cases, it is the first time that the customer is buying a home. So we can, yeah. So this is, roughly gives you a sense of our, the book that we have. We have roughly about 21,000 borrowers. We have about 1,200 crores is what we have lent in the last 2.5 years. We can skip this. So this is, I think, the first part which I thought I would touch upon, which is, the financial services system, the business that we are trying to build. And clearly, we are very, very small. We have a long way to go, but the opportunity is huge. The other benefit we have is, we are using technology and trying to digitize as much as we can. So we have last month, I think we must be the first company, while, a lot of you may have taken unsecured personal loans, but we have launched an instant tractor loan for a farmer. So it's again on the app, he can do it himself or he can be assisted. So we want to use technology to kind of come up with products which today are easily done in a segment where, people have bank statements, etc. But can we come up with a product in segments where you don't have bank statements, where you have what we call surrogates, which you have to take to kind of build your rule engine. So that's what I will stop from a financial market perspective. And I think the second part.
So I think, Gaurav, why don't we take a couple of questions on this sector? Amit, would you like to ask him the questions?
Yeah. So, sir, first question from our participant Yashraj is there. So he's asking, like, I am planning for a vertical poly house for a farming and the investment will be around 2 crores. So if in future I ever made a project report and present it to Adani Capital, can I expect financial help?
Sorry, can you repeat that? He's planning what?
Yeah, he's saying that I am planning for a vertical poly house for a farming and the investment will be around 2 crores. So if in future I ever made a project report and present it to Adani Capital, can I expect financial help?
You're the customer you have.
So very well put. As I said, our entire vision is to support entrepreneurs and enterprise. So if the loan is really used for building something like this, it is something definitely, it is part of our this. The only thing I would say is today, we've identified our segment. So I don't know in which sub-segment this will kind of fall in, but I'm sure by the time he graduates and he puts up this plan, we will be funding these projects as well. So yes, he is more than welcome to come and apply when he's ready.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you. Sir, another question is from Dev Rajesh, and he's asking, like, being a NBFC and HFC company, how differently has COVID situation affected both of them? So I'm repeating the question. Being
no, I've got
NBFC.
Yeah,
okay.
I've got the question. It's a very good question. So I think COVID has had an impact on every business. In some businesses, the impact is less. In some, it's higher. In some cases, the recovery will be faster, and in some cases, it could be more prolonged. So just to give you an example, pre-COVID, our collections that we would do every month would be almost 96 to 98%. As you all know that in March, end March, the Reserve Bank announced a moratorium, which means if someone has a loan and if he does not want to pay a loan, then he can seek for a moratorium and he can get his loan tenure extended. So if it was a 3-year loan, it would become a 3.5-year loan, or depending on the kind of product and interest rate, etc., etc. So as against 96, 98% collections, a lot of our customers opted for moratorium in April and May, where our collections actually went down to about 50%. But we have seen in June, our collections were 82.5%, as a lot of businesses had restarted. And we are hoping that this month as well, collection should be at least what we saw in June. Although I think in a lot of our locations, we have seen new cases emerge, and this entire month I have done a virtual branch meeting. So some of our locations like Surat, Bangalore, Mysore, Jodhpur, I think these locations have gone in the lockdown, but I think we would comfortably cross about 80%.
Yes. So another question is from the participant, like the coronavirus outbreak is foremost a human tragedy. So it is also having a growing impact on global economy. So what challenges did you and Adani Capital face amidst a pandemic, and how you panned out?
See, I don't think no single individual could have predicted the pandemic. And I don't think in our life we have experienced anything like this. So I don't think anyone predicted, and no one ever thought that the impact could be so prolonged. I mean, we started this lockdown in March and we are pretty much entering August, and we still don't know, when things will kind of evolve. So, of course, the impact of this is on businesses. Obviously, if consumption slows, and linked to consumption, the factory output slows. If the factory output and factory profitability slows, then there is a big risk of employee retrenchment, etc., etc. So how do we recalibrate our business and what do we do? I think we have to, not knowing where things will kind of end and when we will start the recovery. I think we are taking steps where at the same time we are being cautious. We are spending less. We don't want to. Our biggest strength is team. We don't want to kind of retrench the team, but wherever we can save, we are trying to save till we can ride this phase out. My personal view is that once there is certainty as to when this thing will get over, the recovery will be V-shaped. And I think coupled with some of the initiatives that India has announced and the position of India, Atmanirbhar, and if some of the labor law changes that have been proposed, some of the other changes that have been proposed from an investment perspective, I think in the medium to long term, India will and should come out a big winner.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So another interesting question from the participant Ravi. So he's asking, NBFC like Bajaj Finance gives no cost EMI loans. So please share how they make money and from that kind of loans schemes and all.
But who asked this question?
Ravi.
So Ravi, what I would request you is that you should go and see Bajaj's investor presentation and annual report. What you see as 6-month free EMI, interest-free EMIs on each of these products, they actually make anywhere between 22 to 28%. So the question is, how do they make this return? Obviously, somebody has to pay for it. Either let's say you're buying a mobile phone, either the manufacturer pays for it or the dealer pays for it. So it is nicely packaged, and they get into these schemes with these OEMs, and that is how they make money. But for you, it seems that this is all interest free.
Yeah. So in this segment, we have last question from Manthan. Then thereafter, we will be taking some more questions. So he's asking why repo rate and reverse repo rate keeps changing.
Why repo rates and reverse repo rates keep
Reverse repo.
changing? So when the Reserve Bank wants that banks should actually lend to corporates so that corporates can set up more projects, and these projects will create more employment. Employment will create more consumption, and the entire economy will start. When they want banks to lend, then they want to reduce the rate at which banks can park money with the Reserve Bank of India. So it is at one level a disincentive for banks to not to park money with Reserve Bank of India and actually lend to corporates and take that risk. So it is a tool which is available to them whereby they try and direct the banks to lend to corporates to grow.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So
Shall we go ahead with the? Yeah.
So coming to the next part of my presentation is really talking about mergers and acquisitions, and I think I can say without doubt that in the last 3 to 4 years, Adani Group has been by far the most acquisitive corporate group in our country, and they have made several acquisitions and entered into several new businesses. And on this slide, let me talk about a few of these, acquisitions. Adani Port, as you know, is India's largest port company. But there were two significant acquisitions that they made in the last 3-4 years. I think to start with the Dhamra port, it is a post while the group had a very good presence in Western India. It was amongst the large acquisitions we did to kind of get a foothold in East India. And on the eastern side, the group is currently in the process of completing the acquisition of Krishnapatnam port, which is the second largest private port in the country. And with Dhamra and Krishnapatnam and Kattupalli, we would have the dominance that we have on the western side. We would have kind of created that dominance on the eastern parts of the country. If I come to Adani Transmission, I think the most significant acquisition that we did was the acquisition of the Reliance distribution business in Mumbai, where the group from a pure B2B business announced its foray into B2C business. So I don't know how many of you are from Bombay, but all the electricity connections that you see in your home from Bandra to Virar now is an Adani connection. Similarly, on the power side, we've done a lot of acquisitions, starting with a power plant in south of India, Udupi, to two plants in the coal belt with GMR, Korba, and now more recently another plant in Orissa. And then I think lastly on the renewable side, we've acquired a small portfolio from SL. So this is, I think it summarizes some of 75-80% of the acquisitions that the group has done. In addition to that, the group announced its foray into airports in the last few years. So airports has kind of built as a new vertical, roads, another big vertical, and thereby, if you look at all aspects of infrastructure from ports, power, airports, transmission, renewable energy, I think without doubt we are the largest infrastructure group in the country, and perhaps I think we would be amongst the largest globally. What is also very interesting and exciting is that in every segment that the group has entered into, we are by far the number one private player in that segment. So I think
Gaurav,
this is, yeah.
Gaurav, would you like to tell us something about how the Macquarie was one of the largest player in the infrastructure area? Something about that?
Sure. I think, I mean, it's a function of you can be jack of all, or you can, you know, try and become a master in one or two segments. And in my role, when I got the opportunity to run Macquarie in the country, we decided to kind of play to our strength. And as an organization, Macquarie has a lot of infrastructure experience, both from an advisory and asset management perspective, likewise with real estate. And we felt that let us build our expertise in these two verticals and segments and try and do more business as against trying to do also financial services and consumer and pharma, etc., etc. So I think it was really a choice that we took, that we want to go deep. We position ourselves as the experts in a couple of sectors. We felt that would help us build greater client relationships and do more business.
And the bank also had a very, very big role to play in the Australian infrastructure space also, right?
That's right. That's right. So if you go to the next slide, I think what should be most relevant for this group is that why do companies do acquisitions? And what I have really talked about here are some of the objectives of why you should do an acquisition. Acquisition is just paying money, but you have to have a basis of what you are going to do with that asset, which you can do better than what the earlier owner was doing. And it is only in that scenario, probably you can make this a worthwhile acquisition. So people do acquisitions for growth. Now, growth comes from new markets. As I said, when we did the acquisition of Dhamra and Krishnapatnam port, it was a new market. People do acquisitions for new products or new businesses or new customer base. So when Adani Transmission acquired the business of Reliance Distribution, we were getting into a new customer base. We were getting into a B2C business, where for the first time we were going to go to the homes of the customer. Then let's look at the second category. People also do acquisitions to get to a certain size and scale. So if I look at the power acquisitions that we have done 2-3 acquisitions in east of India. If I look at all these 3 acquisitions put together, I have acquired scale in that area, which is the coal belt, and it helps from a procurement perspective. It helps from a distribution perspective. People also do acquisition to reduce competition. If you see some of the acquisitions we've done on the transmission side, we have done a lot of these transmission companies where today, I think there are, other than Power Grid, which is a government company, there are probably just 2 or 3 private players left. So we are by far the largest, and as the smaller companies are looking to exit, our plan is very clear. We want to acquire each of these small companies. So we create a formidable position for ourselves in the market. The third part, I think, is value creation and turnaround. I have an expertise. I think I can run a power plant much better. So I'll give you an example of one of the power companies that we acquired, a company called Udupi. It's in Mangalore, in a place called Udupi. It was run by a company called Lanco. But Lanco was never able to run the plant at more than 60-65%. But from the time we acquired that plant, we were able to run the plant at 90% plus. So we felt we had the expertise to turn around and earn more from the asset, and which is why we acquired that power plant. So the entire value creation and turnaround expertise really comes from your experience, and it is always what you are able to do better. It could be operationally, it could be financially, it could be market related. So I think these are the three areas or the three categories in which companies could look to kind of do an acquisition and thereby further improving their position in the market. So I think that's really, I don't think there's any other slide, but I thought, we'll touch upon this, and, happy to kind of take questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So there is a question from Vineet. He's asking how deal works in merger and acquisitions.
What do you mean how deal works? I mean, देखो लाइफ में सब एक नेगोशिएशन होता है, एक बायर होता है और एक सेलर होता है. So you have to negotiate to be able to get the deal at your price or what you are willing to pay. So I'm not sure what his question was, but deal acquisition में क्या होता है? सबका एक price expectation होता है. उसके पहले you have to do a due diligence, because only when you do a due diligence of the operational aspects, the financial aspects, you know what is in the company, what are the liabilities, what is provided for, not provided for. That gives you a better insight. So typically there would be a three phases in a deal. One, you will broadly agree and shake hands that, okay, I like your company, I think I'm willing to pay X amount of money. This will be followed by a due diligence where you will do all your findings. That is phase 2. And phase 3 would be your final documentation where you will sign agreement, make payment. Of course, a lot of deals have requirements where you need regulatory approvals, lender approval. So that then forms part of phase 3.
So yeah, Vineet, I think you are getting your answer. There is a question from Dev. So he is asking, what are your views on blockchain system and its use in finance sector?
So I'm not an expert in blockchain, but not only in finance, but in supply chain. I think wherever you are able to establish a linkage that effectively allows you to ensure the authenticity of that transaction and that flow of that transaction. So I think that is really the biggest benefit of blockchain. So for instance, from a supply chain perspective, as we see, in financial services, I can track, when the invoice, from where the invoice was originated, to whom it was given to, where the company manufactured and subsequently sold. The entire journey can be captured.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Sir, there is a question from Suvankar Day. He is asking how the acquisition of SL Finance helps Adani Capital.
SL Finance?
Yeah, helps Adani Capital.
So it was a small acquisition. They were in a similar segment that we were in, where they also give business loans, MSME loans. They wanted to get out of the business, and 80% of the geography was common. So we could manage that portfolio. We got 2 new locations where we were not present, and we could start business with their team, which is Noida and Chennai. So it's a business which we understood. It gave us 2 new locations, and because they wanted to exit the business and they were in a hurry to exit the business, we think we got that business at a good price also.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So there's a question from Mohit. He's asking very interesting question. Why people are more investing in mutual funds than in stock market, knowing that the returns are higher in stock than mutual.
Why? See, retail investor तभी एंटर करता है जब मार्केट गिरने वाला होता है. So every time there is this wave, we will find that retail investor will not invest when the market is going up, but middle to high, they will all get in. And then when it falls, then they all become risk averse. So then they all say mutual fund is better. But I think investing is a function of knowledge and discipline. So people, who invest in stock market, I'll give you an example of my father. My father says, oh, this stock is good. It is only trading at 10 rupees. But this stock is not good because it is trading at 250 rupees. But ऐसे नहीं होता है. You have to see at 10 rupees what is the market cap of that company and compare that with the earning of that company. Similarly, it is possible that 10 rupee shares may have 100 crore shares. So 100 crores into 10 rupees, the value is 1000 crores. But that 250 crore company may have lesser number of shares and may seem, but the profits may be lesser. So when people talk without having knowledge and understanding, then they make mistakes. The second thing is markets are volatile, and as we become more global, what happens in the US, what happens in EU, what is happening in our countries, that has an impact from a volatility perspective. So you can't invest कि यार मैं 30 days के लिए invest करूंगा and then I will take out, which is why they say that when you're investing in the equity markets, make sure that there is no immediate need for capital. You can be able to ride at least at 3 years. So then that equity market is right for you. So I would say invest in equity markets. First, build understanding. And second, when you have luxury of time, if you need capital in 6 months, 12 months to meet some obligation, then probably there are other avenues for you as against investing in stock market.
Thank you, sir. So last 2 questions. One question is from Pooja. She's asking how are NBFC different from other banks? How NBFCs they are different from other banks? What regulations are applicable to it?
What?
Regulations are applicable. Yeah.
So as I said, I can't open an account, Pooja, for you if you want to open a current account or savings account. NBFCs can't open that account, but you can go to any bank and you can open an account. So I think that is the biggest differentiator between a bank and an NBFC. The regulations which apply to us is that RBI regulates us, it audits us, it sees. So we are required to maintain a certain capital adequacy. So which means there has to be X amount of equity and I can only borrow a certain amount. Then there are regulations where how much I can lend maximum to one party so that I don't significantly increase the risk. So these are some of the differences and the regulations which apply to NBFCs.
Thank you, sir. Last question from Barkha. She's asking what is the key to balance all the market situations? The trends goes up and goes down. So how to deal with this?
Barkha, I wish I knew the answer. So if I knew the answer, I would be far more successful and wealthy. But I think you have to have your priorities. You have to set your priorities, and you have to kind of set your goal and then work towards what you want to achieve. I think goals and priorities are different for every person, and so long as you have a goal and you are working towards a goal, I think that is most important.
One more question, sir, from Rajesh, Dev Rajesh. So he's asking, I think the stock market is a bubble right now, which is getting bigger and bigger, and big players don't want the bubble to burst. So they are making the bubble bigger, but I feel the bubble will burst eventually. So is it true? Should I repeat this question, sir?
No. I understood the question. So Rajesh, I think you have to first understand, when you say it is a bubble, you are referring to the Sensex or the Nifty, which is going up and which has probably gone up 30-40% in the last 45 days. But if you really look deep, you will see that there are 30 companies which make a Sensex and 50 companies which make Nifty 50. A lot of these companies are IT companies. The sector has done well. A lot of weightage is given to Reliance Industries, which has done exceptionally well. So the entire Sensex gain and Nifty gain that you see is largely a function of that. But I don't think generally you can make a statement that everything is going up. Second, the reason why also, of course, whatever is going up is because of liquidity scenario. There is a fair amount of money which is coming from outside India also, because of all the programs that have been announced by the Fed, where cost of money is next to nothing. So people are all trying to kind of invest that money somewhere, and with that, some part of money also gets allocated to countries like India. So that is also driving, the increase in Sensex and Nifty. But you have to kind of understand what is going up, how is it calculated, and why. If you understood this, then you can, based on this, decide what you want to invest in. It may not be a Nifty 50 or a Sensex, but you can be stock specific. And once you're stock specific, I think you can invest at any point in time. You don't have to be worried about any bubble.
Thank you, sir. The questions there keep coming, but last question I am taking. So one participant is asking, what is hedge fund?
Hedge fund.
Yeah.
A hedge fund by nature is a fund which hedges. So it is supposed to be a fund which could make money in a market which is growing up, or it could make money when the market is falling. So to give you an example, in a rising market, when I buy futures and at a higher price, or options at a higher price, and the market goes up, I also make money. Similarly, I can short a position when I think the market is bearish, and I can make money on that basis. So a hedge fund typically is someone who hedges the ups and downs and should be able to make money irrespective of how the market is behaving.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks. I will request Devang sir. Devang sir.
Yeah, I'm very much there.
Yes, sir.
It's good that Gaurav ended with the hedging part. There are some interesting questions here in risk management also. I think we'll get Gaurav next time to tell us how does he do the risk management in his business. And
always happy to be in front of the team.
Yeah, and very good, Gaurav. It was extremely good. I mean, you planned it out so well, and I think a lot of people got an insight about what it means to look at finance from a different perspective. And of course, we have lots of stories that Gaurav has in terms of how do you do the negotiation. I think he can spend possibly a couple of hours only telling us how to negotiate and ensure that the deal does not go away. So that's a very important thing that you will learn over a period of time in terms of, and then you can ask Gaurav a question that what skills are required in that context. And I think thank you again, Gaurav. It's always a pleasure. And I hope you announce a couple of more acquisitions down the line, so you can tell us and share the stories with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you,
Any,
Devang
any
bhai.
of the
Thank you.
students, would like to come out and talk to Gaurav and say thank you, they're most welcome. Okay.
Yes, anyone has any question? Students,
Good afternoon, sir.
yes, please.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, Yashraj.
So can you please elaborate a little more about the NABARD?
About NABARD.
Yes, sir.
NABARD is an agency which the government has set up to help the agriculture sector. So typically, the funding that they provide is to institutions who are on lending to farmers. So, for instance, we give loans to farmers. So I can to lend to farmers, I can go to NABARD to raise money. So their entire objective is to help institutions, including banks, who take a role in funding and financing farmers.
Okay, sir. Sir, can't we directly go to NABARD and ask for funds, sir? Is that not? It's not possible.
You may, I mean, as I don't know whether as a farmer you can directly, maybe they have a direct lending book, a small part of it, but in my view, no. It is generally a refinance option for banks and financial institutions.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Yashas.
Thank
Any other
you.
participant? Any question? Any participant? Any students? Yes,
Sir
please.
Barka here. Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, Barka.
Sir, I want to know, consolidation of companies is sometimes good and bad. So, sir, I want to know that how to decide that it is going to be worth it or not. Like how you decide. What are the
So,
key points you take?
so obviously, whenever someone is acquiring, you think it is going to be good, and that is, that is the basis on which you acquire. But many a time when you make an acquisition, you find that some of the assumptions that you took are not right. If you felt that, oh, you can grow this business 15-20% every year, and based on that you paid a price for it, and then you realize that no, there's a problem with the product, there's a problem with the technology, there's a problem with the manufacturing, whereby 15-20% growth is not possible. You can at best grow 2-3-5%. Then you realize that you've overpaid for that acquisition. So which is why knowing the segment, knowing the industry, the market, the operations is very, very key if you really want to make any acquisition a success. Many a times we find people who enter into areas where they don't have expertise, and then they realize that they are not able to manage this business, or that they have paid a lot of money, and that's when they end up making losses.
And sir, as Devang sir told that you are very good at negotiation, so sir, any few tips for us?
Good in negotiation. I think the key thing in a negotiation is one, you have to be a good listener. And whenever a deal is done, and each of us is doing a negotiation every day in our life, when we are buying anything, we are negotiating with our parents for something. It is all a negotiation. The trick, if you ask me, is where you get the other party to agree to what you want, but in a manner where the other party believes they are winning or they have got the upper hand. So I don't know. I can't explain it like this, but maybe we will have another session if Devang sir agrees, where we can take examples and I can demonstrate that
Yeah,
how do you get to this position.
what Gaurav said very truly is that the other person should not feel there should be a win-win situation. And that's what Gaurav always does that, you know. He, in spite of having, he leaves something on the table for the other person so that the relationship maintains and the guy feels that, okay, I've got a reasonably good value. So one of the biggest stuff in I think negotiation is that you make the other person as comfortable, you know. Great. Thank you, Gaurav.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to each of you. Thank you, Devang Bhai.
Always a pleasure, sir.
Thank you, Amit.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you,
Take
sir.
care.
Thank you,
Have
sir.
a nice day and stay safe.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Amit. It was a good
Thank you,
session.
sir. Thank you,
And I
everyone.
think-
We appreciate you being here. Thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Thank you,
And I
Gaurav,
think,
sir. Devang.
yeah, and also I think the students, this is a very important session because the way in which how a company grows is one of the most important insight that a manager needs to have, especially in the Indian context when a lot of activities are coming. One of the things that merger and acquisition comes in also because of the companies go bankrupt. That is also a source of M&A. If a company, if you see SR Steel, if you see Bhushan Steel, all of those companies went bankrupt, and there was an opportunity for acquisition to Tata's and ArcelorMittal. So you need to understand how in the next couple of years M&A is one of the most important story. Get your bearings clear. M&A is a hybrid structure. It is not just finance. It's a question of strategy, people integration, because very different companies are integrated, and there's a whole science in that. So track every M&A. At least track all the M&As that Adani is doing, so that you will get every time asked questions, and we'll provide you with people who will answer to them the live situation. Okay. Thanks a lot. Have a nice evening. Thanks, Amit.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.